Hey everyone, you caught me just sitting down. Good morning. Good morning to everyone. Happy Friday. It's Dr. Tracy, and I want to welcome you back for the next edition of 16 and Me. So as everybody is getting ready to log on, hello Marilyn Choi, nice to see you. Hello Lloyd, and it's nice to see you. We're going to get going in just a few minutes here. So I just want to welcome you to the next episode of 16 and Me. Happy Friday to you too, Marilyn. And so let me just, hello, sexual counselor. It's nice to see you. I'd like to talk to you one day, huh? Okay, so 16 and Me. For those of you who are joining us for the very first time, I'm going to, right off the bat, answer that question that so many people have, which is what? What is 16? Okay, so 16, for those of you who are joining us again for the first time, 16 is that inner persona that lives inside of us, that has like an ego out to here, issues out to here, fears out to here. It's I always believe that within every female, because I can't speak for men, but within every female, there's about 17 different personas inside of us. And we all know each other, and we all get along fabulously, except for 16. Because 16 is that one critical voice inside of us that if we're not aware that this critical sabotaging voice is inside of us, it has the power to completely derail and stop our life and keep us from our personal best. And as a potentiality coach, everything I want is for you to be able to step into the next best, highest definition of self. So in the world of psychology, they call this inner critic voice the pathological critic. In Buddhism, they call it Maya. In some spiritual circles, they might call it the shadow feminine. But for me, I call her 16. And one day in my prayer and meditation time, I was like, why is her name 16? Why did she come up with number 16 out of the 17 different personas? And the download that I got was because 1 plus 6 is 7. And 7 is really a magic number and a miracle number, and which means that we need that contrast person in our life. We're not supposed to go through life as though that doesn't exist, because especially those of us who come from deeper and deeper traumas, that's just a part of our makeup. Now, it doesn't have to be the governing voice of our life, and that's exactly what this show 16 and Me is all about. It's learning to recognize that 16, understand that voice, that critical voice, is nothing more than a trauma wound sitting inside of you, and learning to create that space where you can introduce healing and change and the takeover of the 16, or as I like to say, I just on occasion we always, when that voice flares up inside of us, just basically need to say, not today, princess. Not today. Because one of the visions that I got one time when I was kind of praying and meditating on this whole concept was like a vision of the Last Supper. And there were 17 seats around the table, and 16 was taking up about 15 of the seats, which the moral of that story was telling me that's why my life wasn't working, is because that critical voice inside of me, that pathological critic, who I call 16, was taking over and being the number one managing voice. And as thought is everything, my beautiful souls, as thought is everything, in order for us to be able to step into the highest definition of self, or the next best high definition of self, because we are like grass, we are ever evolving and growing, that we need to draw a difference, a space between 16 and me. Yes, Silver Lining, I did get it. We'll make room for you to be on the show because today I have a different guest on the show, but we'll definitely make room for you. Let's see who's all out there. Hi, Nekti over in Albania. It's so nice to see you. Hello, Olgita. It's nice to see you. Hello, Penton. It's nice to see you. Who else is there? And hello, Tracy. Tracy, I like your name. Okay. Listen, one of the things that, let's just do some overview about 16, and then we're going to be bringing in my guest from the week. Now, one of the things that I like to, the very first thing is to recognize that all of us have a 16 in us. And for those of you who have been through even deeper trauma, your 16 runs deep. And the reason that we have to be so aware of this pathological critic voice inside of us is because many times, especially if you come from trauma when you're younger, you think that pathological voice is actually your thoughts, but they're not your thoughts. They're the trauma thoughts that are living inside of us, and we need to learn to silence them because our mind, our emotional space only has, we're like a glass of water. We only have so much room. We're not infinite room within us, that we only have so much room. And if that's clogged with the negative voices, no matter how much you want to create change in your life, unless you make room for it, there's no room for it. So one of the goals that we have to do is to silence, shutty, that critical voice inside of it and replace it with life-giving messages. And as we are in control of our thoughts are not in control of us. We do have the power to be able to do that. So it's super exciting. It was one of the most, it was like a big step in my road to being able to reclaim me. Okay, so a couple of things about the 16 that I always want to point out in this show. Number one, it has a name. It's called 16. Well, at least around here in Tracyland it is. Number two, this voice, and it's not a schizophrenic voice. It's not this audible voice. It's intense thoughts that, as some of my former guests have said, Alicia Pelosi said, it just built a runway in my living room and just strutted for an entire month. Or another guest of mine, Tasha, she had a great quote when she said, 16 thinks that she has season tickets to my mind. And so if we're not aware as to how powerful this voice is, and it's not the same in everybody. Some people have very little of an inner critic, and you know what? God's power be with you, because that means that you have probably experienced little trauma in your life. But those of us who have had trauma, our critical voice is very, very, very loud. In fact, it could be one of the first voices that stop us. Let's see. Hello, Mimi Do Social. Hello, Vesna. It's nice to see you all. I appreciate you all for logging in. Let me know where you're from. Would love to hear where you're from. Okay, so it has a name. It stems from trauma. It is basically a liar, liar, pants on fire. Hi, Annie. And the next thing that you need to know is that we have skills and our own personal powers to be able to silence it. And I want to talk a little bit about some silencing skills, and then I'm going to be bringing a guest into the classroom here, and we can walk through it. Now, one of the things that is so important, and I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, one of the things that's super important when it comes to understanding your 16 is that depending on the type of trauma that you've gone through, the type of environment that you were raised in, etc., your 16 probably has a lot of clothes in her closets, a lot of dress-ups that she can put on. Okay, what do I mean by that? Meaning that on some days she can show up as the great judger. On some days she can show up as the perfectionist. On some days she can show up as the anxiety addict. On some days she can show up as the doubting Thomas. On some days she can show up as like the the doomsday depressed that all she wants to try to convince you of, or here she is just to crawl into bed and to give up on life. Well, today my guest is going to share with us which outfit which common outfit I should say, her 16 shows up as. And the whole thing to understand is that they can show up in different costumes. Like I said, like one day you might master the fear, but the next day the doomsdayer might show up. But it's not your thoughts. It actually stems from a trauma wound. So let's see if my guest for the week is here. She's not here, but why don't we just request and invite her? Hello, Mel O.B. It's nice to see you. There we go. Hi, that was a quick log on. There's Let's see. I just want to make sure. I always get my microphone backwards. Can you hear me? Okay, let's see. Now you can hear me. Now I can hear myself, so that means you can hear me. So to all of my viewing audience, I would like to introduce you to our beautiful Lori. And Lori, and tell us a little bit about yourself. You're up in Canada.
Yes. So I'm in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and which
So can I ask a question? So does that mean that 16 is international? Like she actually crosses borders?
she time travels too.
She time travels too. Yes, she does. I know she could show up in your dreams and she could show up in your past and your future and your present. All right. So is it cold up there in Canada right now?
It has been, but we're starting to warm up. I mean, as in warming up, I say like 1 degree, 2 degrees Celsius. But we'll take it.
Yeah, when I'm in cold weather, my 16 tells me I think I'm going to die. She's like, you're going to die. You are going to die of freezing to death. That's all there is to it. I'm like, I'm not going to die. I'm just cold. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, I know that you've been watching the show for a while, and tell me what it is about the concept of 16 that drew you in.
You know, honestly, Dr. Tracy, I think it's all about awareness, right? And I get the sense a lot of us walk around not even aware that there's a 16 in us.
Exactly. And that's really, really debilitating. Okay, so as we have only so much time together, let's just jump into it. And one of the first things I want you to do is introduce us to your 16, meaning, what wardrobe does she show up in? And I know that you talked to me about it. So why don't you share with our viewing audience, what she showed? Is she the great judger? Is she, the negaholic? I loved yours, so I want you to share that, and then we're going to hear a little bit her voice, that chatting voice inside of you. So let's go.
So my 16 shows up as dismissive.
Oh, Mrs. Dismissive.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I've only recently kind of started to navigate through all of this and realize how much I dismiss myself. And so, which is her dismissing me. And how much when you dismiss yourself, other people dismiss you as well.
Well, that's because what we put out is what comes back to us. And that's, Lorianne, that is such an important point. And that's one of the key reasons that we need to learn to silence this critical voice inside of us, because it could become a manifester in, yeah, and it can, you're like, I really want this. Why are these things not happening to me? Why are they're happening to other people? And why are they not happening for me? And so what's running in the background of our mind's radio, right, is Mrs. Dismisser. Okay, so introduce us to us. How does she talk to you? What does she say?
So as an example, she would, I would, every time I felt I achieved something,
Mm-hmm.
she would say things like, well, that's only because blah, blah, blah. So she wouldn't give me credit. She wouldn't let me enjoy it, even if it was something good. So, things like, the Mrs. Glow pageant, and oh,
Winning Mrs. North America.
hey, Mrs. North America Globe. I was I'm trying to enjoy it, and in the back of my mind, there's her voice going, well, you might have gone to, this and that, and you weren't there because of COVID. So and it's just all these things that are dismissing my enjoyment, right? And so,
Right, right.
and I mean, it definitely crossed.
She sounds like a teeth sucker.
Oh,
Well,
oh,
oh, and she does the double fingers. Yeah, Andrea's is a single pointer finger. Yours is a, oh, and the head tilter. Is she the head tilter inside your mind's eye? Oh, yeah. Oh, well, you better not get too happy about that because you don't really deserve it. How many of you watching can relate to that when your 16 pops up, she could be the great dismisser and really holding you back? Okay, so let's walk through this then together.
okay.
So every time that 16 voice is launched inside of us, it stems back to some sort of a trauma or a moment. And the one thing that I want to share about trauma, just to everybody who's watching right now, is that trauma doesn't have to be this ginormous, gigantic, ongoing incident to create what's a trauma wound, right? It could be one person at one moment of time being reckless with their words, and because it touched on perhaps a tender spot, it can lodge itself really, really, really deep. And so many people get stuck in like, I don't know where that root is because they're looking for something big instead of, you know what, it was a day that my teacher told me this or my parent said that, or I got, it punished because of this, or the punishment didn't fit the crime, or different things of that nature. So when you identify that dismissive voice, are you able to pinpoint somewhere in your past that was a similar experience?
Yeah, I think it's when we talk about trauma, um, I feel like there's all like we all have trauma somewhere along the way, right? And what my sort of thoughts are on for myself is to when those kind of rear its ugly head is it's suffering, right? I guess
Okay.
call it
Yeah.
suffering, but I want to suffer well.
Yeah.
If we're
Right.
gonna suffer well, and so I guess for me, like I grew up there was definitely trauma growing up. Again, nothing wham bam huge, but I think all of us have to deal with childhood issues at some point. And I don't, I felt, or I shouldn't say I felt. When I think back, I don't remember um, being heard
Okay.
things. So I think it was a matter of, there's a sense of abandonment, and not a huge abandonment, like my parents didn't love me.
I
Again,
understand. It doesn't have to be a big thing. And that's just it. We're porous beings, especially as children, and the smallest thing can just, hit one of our tender spots, and it hits us the wrong way because we might not have been able to interpret a situation properly. Okay, but you touched on something really, really important. So in your childhood, you didn't feel heard. And so now when you speak up in life and become something,
mhm.
your your emotional system is saying no file available, no file available. We have got to put you back in that place that we all know. It doesn't mean it's good, but it sure is comfortable because you know how to live being silenced. And so that 16 is coming in and trying to silence you again. Do you see? By dismissing, I just had this great opportunity. And it's like, Silencia! Be quiet, you cannot show up in life. You are breaking all the rules.
Of wine kind of too, going like, I own this table. It's my table, and I'm gonna stand up, and I'm gonna like just that, yeah, personality of like tapping the glass. Everyone listen to me. I'm going to tell you that no one's listening, you're not worthy, so sit down, as 16 saying to me. And I think you're right. It's definitely and it's a specific thing. Like it's being unheard on when something was important, and feeling like, then it's in addition to what you're saying, Dr. Tracy, like it's not just even being unheard, or it's something important is being dismissed. And
Well, one of the messages that we absolutely have to have as a child is you are heard, you are valuable, you are important to me. And if we're around any personalities that they think, especially as adults, that they're the only ones to be heard, they're the only ones that's important, and they're the only beings that are to be stopped and recognized, that we literally can suffer from and I not just an identity crisis, but literally just the right to exist. It's like, am I visible? Do I really exist?
yeah, and when you're doing something wrong.
That is a very, thank you for bringing that up. That is a very common um, emotional thought process collision that happens to people who have been raised in environments where my job, the adult says, my job is to be seen, and your job as a child is to watch me, right? When you go and you take yourself back to that childhood moment and you become visible, well, if you're with somebody who that's breaking the rules, you could have been punished, and punishment could have been a sneer, punishment could have been go to your room, punishment could have been you speak and say like, well, wait a minute, I have 2 cents on this. And it was literally like, you're breaking the rules,
Mhm.
right? And so let's see, Mrs. Canada Globe 2020 says, love this, own the table.
People.
Yes. So one of the steps to learning to silence your 16 is always trying to find that root. Like, where did I learn that dismissive voice? Because as children, we are blank canvases,
Yeah.
and you were not born with this pure innocent brain that didn't even know how to formulate words, understanding dismissal, right? So it's somewhere that you learned along the way. Now I'm gonna say something that might be a little bit deep, but it's a super important issue to talk about, and I'll talk about it more as the episodes go on. One of the reasons that we can tend to hold on to some of our 16 voices is they could oftentimes represent somebody in our past that all we wanted was their love, and we never got their love, and so the only feedback we ever got from them was that dismissive voice. And so we hold on to it. And when we think of releasing it, it's almost like this fear comes over us. Like, I am doing something wrong, and I can't release that voice, because if I release that voice, I might be releasing the only feedback or love, or in the case of dismissing, what visibility
Mhm.
you got from that person.
Yeah, that's so accurate, Dr. Tracy. And I, my dad is a recovering alcoholic, and had narcissistic tendencies. And I love you, Dad, if you're on here. But our family's very open about these things right now,
Yeah,
and
nobody chooses alcoholism. It runs in my family too. Nobody chooses it.
yeah, and I think that when you're dealing with those things, it is a personality disease at times as well. And so there was a lot of that. I mean, that consumes a family. And so it's very easy to be dismissed or not heard, because the trauma of dealing with even in a marriage, as now as a wife and mother myself, I can understand how they try to navigate that, and how you can really your kids will be dismissed because something so much bigger is happening, right?
Right. Part of being able to silence that voice, it's a technique also that's called reframing.
Okay.
And so let me talk to you a little bit about reframing. So when I was young, okay, one of my 16s can show up with the abandoning voice,
Mm.
and it should basically say, "You don't deserve to be loved. What if you loved? What are you even thinking?" You know. So this is how my 16 would come up, that very abandoning voice, and so what would happen, and when I was able to start navigating back to that point in time, there was a point in time when I think I was like 7 years old or something of this nature, and I was in our kitchen and I opened a drawer and I found this note. It was in my mom's handwriting and I began to read it. And it was a note where my mom was writing about um, a, a child, the child that she was pregnant with, not sure if she will be able to love this child. She was so scared and blah, blah, blah. Well, I read that and realized, oh my God, she was talking about me. So right there at that moment, there was that message like, well, if your mom doesn't love you or questions love you, who else in this universe would love you? So fast forward, or let me just give you some background information. At that time, my mom was probably 22 years old. She had migrated to the United States from another country. She had zero support system. She was on her second child, and my dad was, off working, doing his thing, not being close by, and she was literally alone. So part of my recovery was to go back and put myself in my mom's shoes. And rather than think about it all about me, what if she was just a human being? And suddenly, rather than the anger, the confusion, the emotional clogging that comes with it, this great compassion and empathy came over me. And I was able to take that moment and that message
Mhm.
and reframe it
Reframe it.
and reframe it. And then I had the opportunity to later in life go and actually talk to my mom
Yeah.
openly to say, can you shed some light, like what happened? And just hearing that person explain where they were, why they were, and like, I got the apology, and I'm like, you don't even need to apologize. I'm just so sorry you were so stressed out. But it's a technique called reframing
Yeah.
that I recommend that you go back and examine that. And if you
Mhm.
don't have that person in your life that you can reframe with, just think of yourself being a mom,
Yeah.
and walking through. So let's go back to the great dismisser. Okay, no, the great dismisser, the double fingered teeth sucker.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. Okay, so part of silencing 16 is learning to talk back to her. One
Mm-hmm.
of the reasons why we get so swallowed up by these internal thoughts is that that we don't understand. We can thought stop, which means stop it, which means shutty, which
Mm-hmm.
means for me, I just say stand down, princess.
Yeah.
Not today.
Yeah.
What are like, give me an example of a thought stopping that you would be able to say out loud. And one of the most important things with 16 is to speak the truth.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's walk through and let's hear 16's voice, act her out, let us see her. And I want to see you take the tool with a thought stop and a reprogramming, a truth telling statement back to her.
Okay. So 16's doing her teeth sucking and going, that only happened to you because of this. Yeah, that, you don't really deserve that. Yeah, that's not because of anything you did. That's not because of anything that you worked for. It really just happened to you because you're lucky, blah, blah, blah. And then, you know what works for me, Dr. Tracy, and this is a little different than most. I go, give me your hand because I know you're there. You're not going anywhere, but I'm going to walk with you. You know what? Let's walk together. Let's just kill her with kindness. I just kill her with kindness. And then it seems to calm it down a bit. And
Mm-hmm.
there's people like that in your life, that the best way to approach them or to kill them with kindness. And it seems to work for me. I calm her down, and then it puts me in a position more of power, going, I've heard you, but we're going to go for a little walk. I'm just going to be nice to you and kind. And then you're going to go back to your table and back to your seat, and you're going to be quiet the rest of the day.
Okay, that's great. So let's go just a little bit deeper and become a little bit more empowered. So you can say, all right, let's just go for a walk. I hear you. And I know that when you're chanting your voice, you're trying to protect me from something, which is obviously, what what's happening inside of us. That's that protection. You have been so hurt in the past. I can't allow this to happen anymore. And if Mrs. Panic doesn't show up, well, you're just showing up as the dismisser, right? Mm-hmm. So what you need to do is say, okay, listen, let's go together, because I know deep inside you're trying to protect me. Let's examine if what you're saying is true. What was one of the things she said?
That's the truth part you're talking about. Speak the truth. Yeah.
Yeah. So give me one of the sentences that she discredited you with. Like you just said, it didn't really count. It really was nothing you did. You didn't really work for it. Okay.
Yeah. I would say it's a good question.
Well, let's work with this one. Let's say that one of the statements was, oh, you really didn't work for this.
Okay.
So you just say, okay, I just, one of my commitments to self is to try to live in the best definition of truth that I can. Okay. So what exactly is your definition of work for it? Because if I recall, I had to work really hard for it. And I can actually present evidence that this is work. And I did put a lot into it. Well, you were just lucky. You know what? Thank you so much, because luck is when opportunity and preparation meet. And because I worked so hard for it, lucky things happened for me. Do you see how it works?
That's mind-blowing. Yeah. Okay.
So let's try one. Try one of her chants. Let's just try to speak some truth to it.
Okay. Well, I was an instructor of communications at our local college here for like a decade. And I would think there's a lot of times, students can be challenging. And so, a lot of, and because you're in a position where you're providing them an evaluation, there can be, you can question yourself, and 16 would come out a lot. Be like, am I, yeah, you might not be being that fair, or, this student might have a point when you're saying this and that, or, and you kind of start justifying it. So I don't know if that would work as an example for.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and this is where you have to say, okay, stop. I understand that in the past, where that probably goes to is I was judged unfairly. I was not given the right opportunity. She doesn't want the same thing to happen to you. This is where you have to stop and remind yourself, my job is not necessarily to be fair. My job is to be an educator and an empowerer. Yeah. And, I firmly believe that we can say anything to anyone. It's the package that we put it in. Exactly. So as you are intelligent, as you are an educator, as you have, educators all have to have the gift of communication. There's a really good chance that you have a good brain on your shoulders. Mm-hmm. 16, got a good brain on my shoulders. I've spent time with these kids. My job is not to be fair. My job is to empower and guide them in the right area. And just like a coach, a coach isn't always like, oh, that was wonderful that you just ran your slowest time. Good for you. A coach will be like, okay, listen, you have a lot more in you to give. We need a different plan to inspire you, to get you going. And so this is how you silence it. You speak it back in truth. There's one thing that I want to say, because we're just about out of time. And it really, when it comes to like the great dismisser or any of the 16s who can attack us. And one point that you made that was really important is learning to um, embrace and love that wounded side of ourselves. That's why we don't need to dismiss her and get rid of her. We just need to give her one seat at the table. There's a great saying that I heard, which is, you can't hate yourself to a better definition of yourself.
Wow. Oh, I like that.
You cannot hate yourself into a better definition of self. And so when that 16 begins to fire, if you want to ever fire back, you just always have to wait. I'm not going to win. I'm not going to evolve into the next best definition by beating the crap out of myself. Love her, bring her in. And ask her, what are you trying to protect me from? And it will come up immediately.
It's just, doesn't it seem to start with awareness?
Yeah.
Like, just, it's such a simple thing. You think, oh yeah, I'm aware. But when you actually become aware, it changes everything.
Everything. Awareness is the first step to change. Just that aha moment of, oh my gosh, it's just creating that new space. And when we create that new space, we create just, a whole new world can open up to us. Well, listen, you know what? I don't want to keep any more of your time. We went over just a little bit. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. For those of you who are watching, if you'd like to be a guest on 16 and Me, just PM me and we'll get you in the queue. And as far as Lori-Ann, I just think that you're a wonderful woman who deserves all the blessings that you're getting. You're such a hard worker, and you're a giver, and you're an inspirationalist, and you're extremely talented. I've seen some of your amazing videos, and so I don't align with 16. I align that she's trying to protect you from ever getting hurt again, and for that I love her, because you don't deserve to be hurt in life. You deserve nothing but love. And one of the things I always like to say to people who I know are working at silencing and stepping into the next best definition of themselves is, you've had enough trauma in your life, and now it's time to have 16 take her one seat at the table and say, it's my turn right now to be celebrated and to be loved.
And to be enjoyed. Aren't we all just to be enjoyed? I love that.
Exactly, to be enjoyed. All right, I love you all. Thank you so much for walking, Lori-Ann. Thank you so much for sharing. By you sharing, it helps people be able to look within themselves. And the reason that I love having guests on the show is because it then makes it real. And when something becomes real, when it no longer is that ghost, as my mom always tells me, if it's a ghost, we can't grab a hold of it. It's like this. But when suddenly it has a name, you can grab hold of it. You can embrace it. You can mend it. You can break it. You can push it out of your life. You can bring it into your life. And thank you so much for empowering other people who are watching. If they have a great dismisser in them, that they can step into that with love and learn how to love yourself to wellness. All right, you guys, so much. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week on 16 and Me.